Hi everybody, I'm DJ Sixsmith. You're watching The Sit Down. Got a really cool event coming to New York in just a little while. Georgina Bloomberg's here to talk about it. Nice to meet you.
Thanks for having me.
How's everything going?
Everything is great. We're excited.
Nice. Yeah, so this should be a pretty awesome event coming to Governor's Island. So how did this all come together and what's it going to be like for people?
So the Global Champions Tour is actually a really cool tour that travels, actually it starts in Doha, Mexico City. We have 2 stops in the US now, Miami and now New York. It's the first time that there's been a horse show on Governor's Island. We've had polo matches before, but it's the first show jumping event. And it's actually the inaugural New York Global Champions Tour. So it's going to be really exciting. Some of the best riders in the world are coming to compete for top prize money. And we're all just really excited to have a beautiful venue and obviously a beautiful backdrop. Were
you surprised that there had never been an event at Governor's Island?
Actually, I was. You know, not a lot of people know about Governor's Island.
Yeah.
I've lived here all my life, and I've actually only been one time. But it's a really cool island. It's very close to Manhattan, obviously, really easy to get to. And hopefully, you know, the weather holds up, and we're gonna have a really great event.
Yeah, because like people do like concerts out there and stuff like that. But yeah, whether it's polo or something like
relatively
that.
unknown, but really a cool space.
Definitely. So you've been on horses your whole life. So when did you kind of know this was going to be your thing?
Started riding when I was 4 and competing when I was 6, and I fell in love with the competition right away. You know, I think every rider sort of starts with their love of the ponies and the horses, and you know, love of the animal is sort of a must. But I really was drawn to the competition. I love working hard at something and then sort of being in the spotlight and showing that off. And when I was 21, I sort of had to make a decision as to whether I wanted to pursue this as a career, and decided to turn professional and start expecting sponsorships and really devote my life to it, and haven't looked back.
I think that's awesome. I think it's also cool that you just leaned right into the competition like at such a young age. And I guess you kind of figured out early on, like, are you about the competition or not? You clearly were about it.
Yeah.
So what was it like kind of just unpacking that part of your personality from a young age?
Yeah, you know, I've always been competitive. I've always been into sports. And I actually remember my first competition, I actually came in last.
Oh, wow.
And I'm very grateful for that, because that really fueled me to want to go home and figure out how to win and to work hard. And I remember the feeling of, you know, winning my first blue ribbon in my first competition, and just loving that feeling and knowing that I wanted to keep working hard at it and keep going from there.
It's amazing how you don't forget the losses, right? They just stick with you.
You know, that's what makes the wins taste even better.
Yeah,
so
because you've had
that.
all this success in your career, but you can still pinpoint that one moment in your career. Like, that's pretty fascinating when you think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, with our sport, you're always going to lose more competitions than you're going to win. The best rider in the world will tell you that too. So I really use failure and my losses to drive me to want to win.
So you mentioned the fact that you turned pro at 21, but you were doing this like as you're doing school, which I always find interesting in talking to Jessica Springsteen, Jennifer Gates. Like, school's not an easy thing in general. You're balancing this whole career on top of it. So what was that part of your life like?
Yeah, it's tricky because it's a year-round sport, and it's really all-consuming. You know, we ride 6 days a week. We travel a lot. It's hard on the body. It's hard on the mind. It's hard on your social life, and it's difficult to balance anything else. And you know, doing school was really important to me. Actually, when you mentioned Jessie and Jen, you know, we all went to college. Jen is actually currently in med school.
Yeah, right.
She's, you know, she's taking on a lot. It's really admirable, and it's a hard balance. But I think when you really love something, you're willing to make sacrifices and willing to pursue it.
So you've been in the city your whole life. You went to NYU. What sticks out in your memory about that time?
You know, I loved NYU. It was really the right fit for me. Obviously, growing up in New York City, it was a bit strange for, you know, a lot of New Yorkers to go to NYU and to stay in the city and not travel and do anything else. But you know, New York is really, it's my home. It's the place that I love the most, and I loved being able to sort of explore a different part of it. And you know, I'm very grateful that I chose it.
I mean, with your career, you're going all over the world, but did you think about going somewhere else for college, or was it always going to be New York?
It was always going to be New York. You know, I think New York is just such a magical place, and it's, you know, it's something that's just in my blood. I've always loved being here. I've never thought about moving or being anywhere else. You know, I say, I'm born here, I'll die here. This is just the greatest place in the world to grow up. You
kind of have everything you need, because especially for you, you understand it's like you've been all over the world. Like, there's some cool places to go and check out and hang out for a couple days, but you come back home and you're like, all right, this is a pretty good situation.
No, the more I travel, the more I love my home.
Yeah, definitely. So speaking of all the travel, where are some places you've been for your competitions that have really just blown you away, or just you remember for a specific reason? You
know, we get to travel a lot to some pretty amazing cities, which is great. You know, we do shows actually for the Global Champions Tour, obviously in Miami and Paris and London, and we get to go to some of the big cities. But some of the travel that I've done with the equestrian world is actually some of the smaller cities and some of the more random places that I wouldn't normally go for a vacation or to sightsee. And you know, we've been to some really cool places, let's say like up in Finland and other places in Scandinavia that I would normally never go. But horse shows sometimes bring you to really cool places that you get to know some of the locals and get to know the community. And it makes you see the city in a different way than you would if you were going as a tourist.
What are the fans like over there? Because they're pretty passionate here in New York. What are they like overseas?
They're great. You know, obviously show jumping is a bit bigger in Europe. It's, you know, quite a well-known sport, and people follow it and go to watch it a little bit more than they do in the States. And that's one of the things that we're super excited about to have this show in New York, is to hopefully bring in some new crowds and to bring in some new fans that might have never been to a horse show and might leave wanting to pursue following it, or maybe a kid comes and wants to start riding. But exposing people to our sport is something that this show is really going to do.
For somebody like me that hasn't spent a lot of time watching your sport, what are the challenges associated with it? And just being on the horse physically, what is it like for you in terms of being in the moment? Because some people kind of get into that flow state where they're just in it and they're doing it. But what are some of the challenges for you when you're actually in competition? There's
a ton of challenges, obviously, with horseback riding. You're an athlete, but you're also on another athlete.
Right.
You're factoring an animal in, and the animal can have a bad day. You can have a bad day. It's very different than, let's say, track or gymnastics, where it's just about you and your performance. And if you're healthy and performing well, you're going to go in and win. And with us, it's there's a lot of luck. Your horse can be in a bad mood. Your horse can have an injury. It's a very different sport, and there's two athletes that you need to rely on. So it's a challenging sport. Obviously, it's a bit dangerous, but it's something that I've always loved. It's physically a bit grueling. Mentally, we travel a lot. It can be a bit tiring, but I've always loved it, and it's always been worth it for me.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to hear a horse called an athlete too, because some people won't label a horse an athlete, but you obviously know, given the time. So how do you build that relationship with the horse? Because like you said, horse can be having a bad day.
Right.
You got to find a way to execute. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, no, horses are definitely athletes.
Yeah.
Our horses are incredible. The way that they perform, the things that they do, they're just incredible creatures. But the relationship with the horse is incredibly important. You can have the best rider in the world and the best horse in the world, and you put them together, it's not necessarily going to equal a great partnership. The relationship with the horse is very important. Building that, getting the trust from the horse, getting the communication correct is really important. You can't just stick a rider on a horse and have them go in and compete well. It takes a lot of time, a lot of work at home, and you have to build that relationship up.
Yeah, it's not like you can just throw different people on a team and just expect something to happen. It takes time,
yeah.
It takes chemistry, and you certainly know that.
Absolutely.
For sure. So thinking about your life, like you've done a ton outside of just being an equestrian. Like you've helped out in a lot of different areas when it comes to animals, and you went to Puerto Rico and had a bunch of stray dogs there. So when did you realize you kind of had that service heart, and what's it been like doing all that sort of stuff?
I've always loved animals. I think that's what drew me to this sport. Obviously, in the beginning was love of horses and wanting to ride and be around the animals, and that's really grown for me. We've always had dogs. I had my first experience back in 2008 of walking into a pound and adopting my first dog, and I always said that was sort of the moment that everything changed for me. I was very unaware of sort of how many dogs in America are euthanized every year, and the amazing dogs that are sitting in pounds all over the country. And when I was leaving the pound with my dog, I actually just said to myself, this is it. I'm going to make a difference for all the dogs who are not going to be as lucky as this one is. And I started learning about how dogs end up in the pounds and learning about puppy mills and spay and neuter projects. And it was something that just really developed. I felt like the more that I knew, the more I uncovered, the more passionate I got about it, and the more involved I got. And it's been a gradual process, but I've been able to help with a lot of different things. Like you mentioned, I've been to Puerto Rico and helped with a spayathon with the Humane Society. We help fight legislation to stop puppy mills. We do a lot of transports out of the South and out of high kill shelters up here to rescues. I sort of tackle it from sort of every angle. It's not something that you can just look at in one way and fight sort of one link on the chain. You have to really go the entire length of the chain and really look at all the different angles and why dogs end up in the pound in the first place. So I'm really proud of my work with animals, and they've given me so much, just with the horses and with my career. I have a ton of dogs at home, and they've given me so much in life that it's sort of my life mission to give back to them.
That's awesome. Yeah, you mentioned you have a bunch at home. How many do you have at home now?
I have 5 personal dogs right now, but we always have a bunch of foster dogs. We actually sent a trailer down to the Carolinas last week to bring back 22 dogs, all of which have now either found homes or been committed to rescues. But it was a shelter in South Carolina that was going to get hit really hard by Hurricane Dorian, and it's a fight. We always have a bunch of foster dogs. We're always looking, and then sort of the next load comes in. But with every dog that we get into a home and being able to follow them and see how happy they are, it makes it worth it.
Yeah, definitely. So you have a son, he's going into kindergarten.
Yep.
Has he been on a horse yet? What does he like it? What's his deal with it?
He has. He loves animals. He sort of had no choice. I was telling him the animals were here first. Yeah, so he sort of had to like animals, and to me, I never really cared whether he rode or not.
Right.
I certainly don't care if he ever competes, but being around animals is something that I think is great for kids and something that was really important to me, that he learned to respect animals, to learn how to take care of them. So he has a little rescue pony that he trots around on the weekends and learns to take care of, and can be at the barn a bit and be involved, and he seems to love it.
That's awesome. What about Dad? Is he an animal guy?
He says he is. We're not so sure about that. I remember when we were kids, whenever my sister and I would get a new pet, we would always leave it in the bathroom because when he came home from work, he'd always walk through the kitchen and into the bathroom. That'd be his first stop, and so we'd always leave it in there as a surprise. So it was always a nice shock when he came home from work. But I think he's sort of accepted that his daughters are animal people, and it's going to be a big part of his life, and he's starting to come around.
There you go. Yeah, it takes a little time, right?
Yeah.
Like I didn't grow up with dogs. My fiance had a dog. I'm trying to become more of an animal person.
Yeah.
It's like a whole different love language. I feel like you kind of have to learn as you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how old were you when your dad was mayor?
I was actually 18.
Okay.
I just graduated from high school.
Which I feel like is a good age to be going through that stuff. Like obviously you had a ton going on, but do you think it helped you being older at that point in your life? Yeah,
I mean, it's interesting. I was 18 when he went into office. I was 30 when he came out. So it's obviously sort of, a very meaningful span of life. Obviously a lot had changed for me. I actually just had given birth to my son sort of in his last year when he was leaving office. And when I look back on, those 12 years, it was really, it was incredible to think sort of, how much he had accomplished, but how far I'd come, and sort of the kid that I was when I was 18, and how much respect I had for him when he was leaving office, and the idea of sort of going for something that nobody thought he could do and nobody thought he could accomplish, and everybody laughed at him when he sort of had that idea of running. And I always say, listen, I think when people think you can't do something, or people say you can't do something, and you go for it and you succeed, it tastes so much sweeter.
Totally.
And that's one of the lessons that he really taught me.
It's crazy to even think that there was a time where people did question that.
Yeah, no, they did, big time. Yeah.
But
no, he always sort of put the haters out of his mind, and I think that sort of fueled him to go for it more.
Yeah, and I feel like it's kind of fueled your career in a sense too, because people assume things based on the last name, and you've talked about this, but you've done incredible things. So it's like, yeah, you deal with this, but at the same time, it's like, here's the proof. So what's it been like for you dealing with all that? Yeah,
I mean, listen, I think that I've always been very thick-skinned. I've always been very competitive, and I actually like it when people doubt you and say you can't do something, and it makes me work harder, and it just makes success that much better.
Totally. Yeah, you can be like, hey, this is all me right here.
Absolutely.
I didn't need anybody's help.
Yeah.
So when people come and check this out, what are some of the big things you want them to take away, whether it's about the sport, about the experience, and just everything involved with it?
Obviously, first and foremost, we want them to come and be able to enjoy some amazing show jumping. It's the highest level that you can get. Like I said, some of the best riders in the world are coming. This is just sort of the pinnacle of the sport. It's going to be a beautiful setting, so hopefully we have people who come and just enjoy themselves. There's going to be activities for kids. There's going to be vendors. It's going to be a beautiful setting and a wonderful day for anybody who comes out. But hopefully also people get exposed to show jumping and get to see this incredible sport and maybe become fans.
Yeah, that's awesome. Georgina, thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Check out Georgina, check out our event. It's Georgina, I'm DJ. See you next time here on The Sit Down.